Good afternoon. It's 3:30 here in Spain. Welcome to this Gaming in Spain webinar, in which we'll take a closer look at some interesting recent developments in the regulated Spanish iGaming market. My name is Willem van Oort. In today's webinar, we'll take a look at the latest news regarding Spain's cross-operator deposit limits, first of all. Second, we'll consider some very interesting recent developments regarding prediction betting in Spain. And of course, there's only so much we can do in one brief webinar. Therefore, if you would like to have more information and updates on the regulated Spanish iGaming market, please consider attending our upcoming Gaming in Spain conference that takes place on October 15th in Madrid at the ESIGA Auditorium. This year's conference will cover the latest regulatory developments, including the DGOJ's new problem gambling detection algorithm and cross-operator deposit limits. The event will also look at new game types, such as prediction betting and sweepstakes that we also talked about today. And we will explore to what extent these new products can be offered in accordance with Spain's regulatory framework at this moment. This year's event in October will furthermore take an in-depth look at offshore competition and will explore how licensed operators can effectively cooperate with additional pressure on this black market. We encourage and invite the entire industry to join us in Madrid to discuss these issues with leading operators, B2B suppliers, and other stakeholders. Before we continue with today's webinar, I would like to thank our strategic partners and sponsors, which you can see listed on the screen. Thank you all very much for your generous support. We would not have been able to do it without you. Also, as always, our webinars are interactive. If you would like to submit a question to one of our speakers, you can do so through the Slido app. To use Slido, please scan the QR code that you see now on the screen or visit slido.com. Then enter the event code, hashtag GIS26. And finally, select the Q&A tab on the top of your screen. This is also where you can upvote other people's questions. Questions will be addressed and, of course, if possible, answered during the audience Q&A at the end of this webinar. With us today, we have three expert speakers. Xabi Munoz, Managing Partner at ESIGA Barcelona. Josh Hodgson, COO at H2 Gambling Capital. And Camille Gonçalves, TMT and iGaming lawyer at ESIGA. Welcome, everybody. How are you?
Hi, Willem. Yeah, great, thanks.
Hi, everyone.
Great. Well, glad to have you all here. And so let's go to the first speaker today, Xabi Munoz, Managing Partner at ESIGA in Barcelona, as I just said. Xabi, thank you very much for being here. We very much appreciate it. Xabi, to start off, the DGOJ recently launched a public consultation. Now, what is this consultation about, and when can we expect a concrete follow-up?
Okay, yeah, sure. First of all, thanks to Gaming in Spain and to Willem, and it's a pleasure to be in this seminar. And going to your question on the consultation, I think there's three aspects to take into account of the consultation. One is the identity impersonation. The consultation goes after people that do identity impersonation in order not to pay their income taxes. So they use the identity of other people to gain from gambling operators and not pay their taxes because they're using another identity. So that's one of the aims of the consultation. The second one is quite interesting, which it goes, it relates to game software providers. Basically, it relates game software providers as part of its fighting against illegal gambling. So the DGOJ considers that maybe these game software providers should be in a registry or should be controlled in some way as part of the fight against illegal gambling. And the third point that it's stated in the consultation, it's about publicity. And this is I think it's an interesting point. As you know, there's the Royal Decree of Publicity, Commercial Communications. As you know, this Royal Decree, the government tried to put restrictions on publicity by way of a Royal Decree. in a way, this was a kind of a shortcut, because then the Supreme Court said, no, you cannot do it with a royal decree, you need to do it with a law. So this shortcut, it was a failure. I mean, it didn't work for the government to do it that way. Then they tried to issue those restrictions into another law, which was the client service law in Spain, as an amendment to that law. Again, the parliamentary process said, no, you cannot do this in this law. This is also a shortcut. You cannot do it this way. So now in this consultation, they are also focusing on this change. And again, discussing on the reinstatement of the publicity restrictions. Just to finalize on this question, Willem, I think the important point on this is that, to go to the conclusion is that I don't think that before 3 years, this law can be modified. Okay? We have now a period until August next year, which is the next general elections will take place. So we have only 1 year. There's no way that this law can be issued in that period of 1 year. Then if there's a change of government or not, in any case, there's a new government and there's a new restart, which most likely seems that it will be a new government. So that government will take at least 2 years to go through all the parliamentary process and reestablish the law. So I think at the end, I don't want to go in detail in all the parliamentary process and timeframes, but at the end, I think that the law will not be changed for at least 3 years. Now that they're doing it in the right process, which is through a changing of a law through the parliamentary process. But I think that 3 years is still quite a lot.
Thank you, Xavi. Actually, that was very, very helpful. In the meantime, to everybody in the office or at home, don't forget that you can submit questions through Slido, slido.com, #GIS26, and either ask questions or upvote somebody else's question there. Xavi, the next question we had for you here today. So following the government's approval of the framework for cross-operator deposit limits last week, how will these rules impact operators?
Yeah, I think, everyone more or less knows what the cross-operator deposit is, but just, the concept is that it will be a centralized cross-operator deposit control managed by the DGOG, to which all operators should be connected. And when a customer wants to make a deposit, they will have to check in that central database if that customer has still a space for a deposit or not, and which amount, further to the deposit limits that are established by the new royal decree. But so this is, how the system will work. But also what I think it's important of this royal decree, it's a couple of things that I will mention, and also the time frame for the implementation of those things. This royal decree also talks about the necessity of appointing a permanent representative in Spain for all those companies which do not have domicile in Spain. For instance, if there's companies with domicile in Gibraltar or domicile in Malta, they are obliged to appoint a legal representative, a permanent legal representative. Actually, in this case, they were obliged since 4 days ago, okay? Because this entered into force next day after publication in the official gazette, which was on the 25th. So this entered into force on the 26th. So if any company is not domiciled in Spain, they have to do this immediately, so to speak. Another matter is they changed the type of guarantees, but basically this is a minor change. The only thing is that they will not allow any more mortgages on real estate properties. They will only accept an insurance or a bank guarantee or cash, so to speak. But this is, let's say, a minor change. But what is important, and this also came into force 4 days ago, what is important on the guarantee for all operators, and that comes into force at the end of the year, is that they have to increase their guarantee from 1 million euros to 1,300,000 euros. And this comes into force and has to be presented to the DGOG before the end of the year. And, being August in the middle, if people has to talk to their banks or insurance companies, etc., you have to kind of speed this to change your guarantees and provide it to the DGOG. And then going to the cross deposit. So these are also issues that are in that royal decree that are also important. But going to the cross operator deposit, also important to know that on 25th of September, and this is very close because we have August in the middle. Okay, on 25th of September, the DGOG starts the test period for 6 months, and operators have to. What the law says is that they have to do all necessary actions to prove the system and to inform players and everything. So this starts on 25th of September. So operators have to start preparing technically, operationally, and from a legal point of view as well. I mean, from our side, operators will have to change their terms and conditions. They will have to explain that the data will be sent to the DGOG, will be checked, will return. Also, they have to change their privacy policy in the terms of this type of processing of data, personal data that they will be doing. And they will have to do a privacy impact assessment on this particular processing of data. And this is 25th of September, so it's quite close, okay? And then the deadline for the cross-operator deposit system to start, it's 6 months later after that. So this is the 25th of March, 2027, okay? But don't be misled on this because the test starts on 25th of September, okay?
Yeah, and that's a little bit less than 3 months from now. We're still the summer in the middle. Thank you, Xavi. Very, very interesting. One final question, Xavi. Are there any other notable recent developments that you can think of?
Well, I think one of the biggest one is the problem gambling behavior algorithm. That's as you know, the DGOG is issued last August 25 to August last year. It issued a draft resolution of how to manage this method and this mechanism of the algorithm to detect problem gambling. They have been working on this, but honestly, this has not advanced so much. They also presented a first, proposal for this, but as far as we know, it has not advanced very much. So this would be one of the main changes. Another one is that there's been an agreement in November 25. There was an agreement between Spain, Austria, France, Great Britain, Italy, Portugal, Germany to fight against illegal gambling. So there's an agreement of sharing of information and cooperation in illegal gambling. And then there's more, let's say, commercially interesting issues like sweepstakes and prediction markets and all these that I let Josh and Camille to tell you about that.
Excellent. Excellent. Xavi, really appreciate your answer so far, and we'll see you in a little while at the end of the webinar with the Q&A. So thank you so far.
Thank you.
For our next couple of questions, we'll turn to Josh Hodgson, Chief Operating Officer at H2 Gambling Capital. Josh, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Willem. How are you?
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you.
Nice to see you again. Josh, as we just heard from Xavi, the Spanish government intends to introduce cross-operator deposit limits in as early 2027. So this brings me to my first question. How is Spain's online gambling market currently performing? And how could the new rules impact the market?
Yeah, sure. So Spain's onshore, so the regulated online gambling market, has been one of the strongest markets in Europe for some time now. It's the 5th biggest market by GGR, generating a total of 1.74 billion across online betting and gaming in 2025. And it's seen growth of 51% over just the past 3 years. So in 2026, we expect the Spanish online betting and gaming market to generate 1.91 billion. But when we look at the unlicensed or offshore side of the market, we expect this to have generated 491 million in GGR in 2025, which corresponds to a channelization rate of around 78%, which does put Spain at 7th in the sort of EU league table in terms of channelization. So, fairly strong rate of onshore channelization there. However, one concerning aspect for the market is the actual rate of growth of the offshore revenue over the past 3 years. So the onshore market has grown by 51%, but over the same period between 2022 and 2025, the offshore market has grown at twice the rate at 102%. So we've seen growth from 243 million in GGR to around 491 million in 2025. So whilst this growth has come from a relatively small base, it's still a very concerning rate of growth, which is something we've seen across many European markets over the same time frame. And that's been due to many things, but one of the most prominent being the explosion in crypto casinos and their popularity over that time frame. So with sort of that backdrop in mind, the introduction of cross-operator deposit limits is a concern for the market when we consider that there is already very strong offshore growth inherent in the market. But when we consider the impact of these changes, our working assumption is that the changes will go live in early to mid 2027, which obviously could be subject to change. But prior to these changes being announced, we forecast the market would generate 2.1 billion of GGR for online betting and gaming in 2027. So when we were looking at the actual assumptions for our forecast, we assume that the top 1% of players in Spain account for just over 40% of GGR, which is information based on previous disclosure by the GGOJ. And this would imply that around 885 million of GGR is generated by 15,000 players.
Wow.
So on average, these players would generate around 4,920 euros per month. So applying assumptions around how these players would actually change their behavior, which we based on the results of our player surveys in the market and the change in relationship between deposits and GGR with high spend players, we have forecast that the impact the impact of this across both the legal and illegal market. And the overall result of this is we expect around a 300 million euro decline in onshore player spend, so onshore GGR. So we expect around 80 million of this will go directly to offshore operators as players leave the market to circumvent the restrictions, which then leaves a net reduction in player spend of around 220 million. So that equates to around a 14% fall in onshore GGR across 2 years. So it's a 7% headwind in both 2027 and 2028. However, given the strong underlying growth of the market, it doesn't lead to an overall market decline in either year, but it does result in a stagnation of the growth that we have seen across this period. So in contrast, the offshore spend, the increase in the offshore spend will lead to around 6% increase in growth in the offshore market across both those years. So by the end of 2028, we now forecast the onshore market to generate GGR of around 2.05 billion versus 1.9 billion in 2026. So not much growth at all, considering how fast Spain has been growing over previous years. Whereas the offshore market, we expect it to grow to a GGR of around 820 million versus 590 million in the current year, which will reduce the channelization rate from its current rate of 76% in 2026 to 74% in 2027. And then we expect it to stabilize at around 71% in 2028 onwards.
Different market dynamics with all that. And thank you for sharing your analysis on this, Josh. Just to remind everybody, if you have any questions to Josh or Camille later, and to Xavi, of course, slido.com, enter the hashtag GIS26 and either upvote somebody else's question or ask your own question that we will deal with at the end of the webinar. Josh, let's move on our next topic, which is prediction markets and of course prediction betting. What are prediction markets? Can you say something quickly about it, and how does prediction betting differ from event betting?
Sure, yeah. So prediction markets are platforms where participants trade contracts whose value is determined by the outcome of real world events. So they could be elections, economic indicators, sports results, temperature, anything really. And the key structural difference from traditional event betting is that the odds aren't set by a bookmaker. So the odds are set by the participants themselves. So if the event happens, your contract pays out. So it's much closer in design to like a financial or betting exchange
Yeah.
rather than a sports book. So traditional event betting, on the other hand, obviously involves a punter placing a fixed odds wager with an operator who prices that market and the operator holds the risk. Prediction markets are completely peer-to-peer, so you're buying and selling contracts with other users, and the market price at any minute reflects the collective view of all the participants in that market. And this is why proponents argue that they produce more accurate probability estimates than bookmakers' odds, where there's no sort of house margin baked into the price in the same way.
Yeah. Well, thanks for clarifying that, Josh. And then, of course, from your data and the market's perspective, is prediction betting becoming more popular globally and in Spain?
Yeah, I mean, globally, the growth has been extraordinary. So we have, real sort of HD data now that puts the numbers behind those headlines. So if we're looking at the total prediction market volume across Kalshi, Polymarket, and other major prediction markets, if we look in Q1 2025, their combined global transaction volume was around $6.5 billion US.
Wow.
By the end of that year, so in Q4 25, it had leapt to 45 billion, which was actually largely driven by the US presidential election cycle. And in Q1 of 2026, so just earlier this year, it hit 77 billion. So it's more than a tenfold increase in the space of 12 months. So we're seeing sports is consistently the largest category, accounting for roughly half of all transaction volume. And the global sports volume across prediction markets reached $40 billion in Q1 2026 alone, up from just 3.3 billion in Q1 2025. If we look at the platform dynamics, we can see these are also shifting. So Polymarket started 2025 as the clear leader, but Kalshi has now overtaken it. So Kalshi generated 34 billion of total volume in Q1 2026 versus Polymarket's 27 billion. And that gap is something that we see widening. So Kalshi's sports-specific growth has been particularly pronounced, which reflects its push into regulated US sports and event contracts. But I think the crucial context here, I think where our analysis cuts through the noise, is that when you actually look at prediction markets' share of, if we look at the US in particular, so we look at their share of the overall US sports betting market, including licensed sports books, on a comparable metric like actual betting handle, the actual picture is far more modest. So in Q1 of 2025, their share of US sports handle was under 1%. And by Q1 of this year, that had grown to around 12%. So that is real growth, there's no question about that. But when you isolate only the states where licensed sports books actually operate, so the genuine head-to-head prediction market share on a like-for-like basis on the same playing field was just 4.3% in Q1 of 2026, which is up from 0.3% a year earlier. So the trajectory is clearly upward, but the starting point is low. And where the majority of prediction market activity is still happening either in markets or categories where sportsbooks simply can't compete. So that's unregulated markets, entertainment markets, politics, and crypto. So that's an important distinction when assessing the genuine competitive threat that prediction markets pose.
Yeah, well, some very impressive volumes and ratios there. You already mentioned something about my next question, Josh, but maybe you can say something more about it. How do you think how should prediction market betting volumes be understood compared to the more traditional forms of betting? You spoke about handle and volume prior, but let's dive a little bit deeper into that.
Yeah, so I think this is a really important question to consider because the headline numbers on prediction markets can be quite misleading, and sort of we've done the work to show exactly why that is. The short answer is that volume, like transaction volume, how prediction markets are judged, and sports betting handle are not the same thing. So conflating them is, in my opinion, what's driving a lot of fear from the industry. So when you see a headline saying something like prediction markets did 1.6 billion handle on the Super Bowl, overtaking the sports books at 1.4 billion, that comparison is very scary. But also in our view, it's completely nonsensical. It's measuring apples by the kilo and oranges by the dozen. So the difference here is in a sports book, handle is obviously the total amount that's staked. In a prediction market, volume counts every time a contract is bought or sold. So a single $10 bet that gets traded in and out of 5 times generates $50 of volume. So the conversion rate from that volume to a handle equivalent varies significantly by sport, but for single game markets like football or basketball, it's roughly 45 to 55%. But for tournaments like the World Cup, it can be as low as 5 to 20% because the multi-day format encourages constant trading in and out of positions. So when we actually go back and do the sort of head-to-head analysis properly, on a like-for-like basis, in the same products, the same markets, we estimate that prediction markets, if we use the Super Bowl example again, we estimate that they generated around 110 million of handle equivalent on the Super Bowl against 1.4 billion for licensed sportsbooks. So that's 7% share for prediction markets. And that 7% isn't even a clean comparison in itself because prediction markets can serve underage bettors, self-excluded customers, and states where there are no regulations. And when we take it to the next level even further and look at revenue, sportsbooks operate on roughly a 10% hold margin. Prediction markets charge per trade fees. So when we actually work that into the transaction volume, it works out around 1.1% of volume. So if we take the full 1.6 billion of Super Bowl volume that we expect prediction markets generated, and that actually includes the entertainment and futures markets that sportsbooks can offer. Prediction market revenues were approximately 18 million against over 140 million for licensed sportsbooks. So based on this, I think the takeaways that I'd like to leave people with are, yes, prediction markets are growing very strongly in terms of transaction volume and popularity. But when you compare the actual handle and revenue head to head against regulated sports betting, they are being significantly overestimated with regard to their current competitive position in the market when you look on a like-for-like basis.
Very, very interesting, Josh. Eye-opener in many, many ways. Josh, thank you. We'll see you later at the Q&A part of the webinar. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Willem.
Our final speaker of today is Camille Gonzalez, who is TNT and iGaming lawyer at ESIGA Barcelona office. Camille, how are you? Welcome to the webinar.
Well, thank you, Willem. I'm great.
Very good. So with Josh, we were just on the topic of prediction betting. What, Camille, is the history of prediction betting in Spain, in your opinion?
The history of prediction markets in Spain is quite short. Prediction markets, we could say that were created in 2020 by the founder of Polymarket when we were in the full COVID pandemic and people wanted to know when the pandemic would end or the lockdown. And so they had the idea of creating those platforms where users could bet about that. And we assume that the users who are betting are quite experts on the topic, which is the great thing about prediction markets. Still, though, even if that appeared in 2020, we're in 2026. And as just said, there's a couple of years that we've been seeing prediction markets coming into Europe. And they have came in a way that the markets were not totally prepared. The regulatory frameworks were not totally ready. So they've been trying to feed their ways into that. And the results, well, during May and during June, we have seen 9 or 10 regulatory gambling authorities from Europe who has been coordinating together. That's something that Xavi mentioned before. So they have coordinating exchange of information, enforcement actions, several geo-blocking on several operators, but mostly targeting Kalshi and Polymarket. Those countries are, of course, Spain, which we will talk about in a minute, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Portugal, Poland, etc. So that also makes sense that they are doing it now because of the World Cup. And so those regulators already mentioned that they would strengthen their actions during the World Cup due to the transactions that were going to be made. So regarding the proper prediction markets, Josh explained it perfectly. Those platforms act like brokers, act like intermediaries. They allow users to gamble or place bets or place future contracts. We're not going to enter a lot into details on how we could put it out, but the difference between those sentences, gambling, placing bets, placing future contracts, is at the core of the whole debate of whether it's a financial trading or whether if it's gambling. So that will be something important, and this is something where players who enter notably into the Spanish markets will have to be careful on how they put it out and how they put the different modalities in their platform so that it resembles to one thing or another. In that case, it will be gambling because the European regulatory authorities are going into that direction, even though in the US we're seeing that they're going into the opposite direction, whether it's considered rather as financial trading. Those markets, those prediction markets give the possibility to bet on yes or on no. And as Josh said, the principal thing about it is that beyond traditional sports betting, it covers also another wide area of events, which can be about economics, entertainment, political, and this is where not all regulatory frameworks are prepared. We will talk later about how prepared is the Spanish regulation. And besides that, those markets also bring other points of focus for the regulators. For example, the mechanisms that are being used for verifying the outcomes might be something that looks like it's easy, but it's not at all. It's not as easy as it can be when we're talking about sports. So that's why new intermediaries are appearing here, which sometimes are based on crypto, which is a technology that's used for verifying those outcomes. So we're seeing a lot of innovation that has to be regulated on cryptocurrency, the fact that it brings new social sharing dynamics, and mostly the fact that at the end, it allows participants to sell their participations before the event begins at the current odd price, at the real-time odd price, not at the price that you bought it or that the operator is going to impose. So users just have this possibility of searching for a buyer of their participants before an event has begun, which is a very specific modality that is indeed hard to regulate. Also, prediction markets are markets or bets on events that can last for years, and people have their bets placed in things that are not going to happen until 2035. And well, at the end, mainly this aspect of buying and selling participations is what in some countries is making it go in the direction of financial trading.
Yeah.
But again, in Europe, it's not the case. Spain is treating it as illegal gambling, as we have seen the activity of the DGOJ lately, when they are placing bets on uncertain future outcomes is when they're treating it as gambling. And we have seen a few geo-blockings already in Spain imposed by the DGOJ. So it would go in that sense in iGaming.
Very interesting history here, Camille. So following up on that, you spoke about the European regulators initiative. So the DGOJ recently announced precautionary measures against unlicensed providers of prediction betting. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, so in the context of this coordination that the different gambling European regulations have been doing now, not casually during the World Cup since May, in May they have issued precautionary measures against Kalshi and Polymarket. So there is no sanction yet. There has been precautionary measures that imply the geo-blocking, and in parallel they have opened a disciplinary proceeding. So the disciplinary proceeding has just started. Kalshi and Polymarket may be in the phase of doing their preliminary or principal allegations, and it is expected to finalize in 3 or 4 months, which is what usually the time that it usually takes. So we're talking here about September or October, which is when we will know what has happened with, or what is a final sanction. If there is one, there might still not be a sanction. And we will know that around October. More things about it is, well, the complete proceeding against Kalshi and Polymarket are not published publicly. We only have the notification in the Gazette because they tried a few times to do notifications to the operators, but they were unsuccessful. So it's notified through the Gazette, but not the whole resolution. Of course, what was worrying here the Spanish regulator was the fact that they probably did not have proper identity verification systems, which were fitting the Spanish regulation, controlling access to minors in the way that we have to do it here, self-exclusions, you all know that. And what will be interesting to see, and which of course we do not know personally, is that depending on how those two operators are going to act from now, the DGOJ will always have the possibility to modulate the eventual sanction. So things that are taken into account in order to modulate the sanction, which, if I remember correctly, could go between 5 million and 50 million. And also we would eventually have the possibility of prohibiting those operators to have Spanish licenses during a maximum of 4 years. But all of that could be modulated attending to different things such as personal rights that have been affected, volume of the transactions, benefits obtained, degree of intentionality, degree of reincidence. So in here, we do not know if it is something that has happened just because internally those operators have not properly activated the markets in which they should be available, the IPs, etc., or if it was because indeed they were not aware of the existence of these regulations and they might have thought that it was possible to enter the market without a license. But according to all of that information that is not public, the DGOJ will be able to decide the amount of the sanction that can go in that frame, and if they also prohibit them from having a license, even in the case that they would request it in the following years. If a formal sanction would be imposed, probably they wouldn't be able to have a license at their name. So we will know more around September, October, whenever the final resolution is public, which, as you all know, so those resolutions are public. The DGOJ publishes them in its website since a couple of years ago or 3 years ago, and that's when we will know more about it.
A lot of happening after the summer, it seems, including what Xabi said before, so very interesting. In the meantime, if you have any questions to Camille or some of the previous speakers, please do so through Slido, slido.com. And maybe you have the app still on your phone. Hashtag is GIS26, and ask or vote the question of somebody else. And we will be there briefly. Camille, we are going to your last question. Hang on with me. So, and this is the one that we have all been waiting for, I think. So, could prediction betting fit into the Spanish iGaming regulatory framework? What do you think, Camille?
So this is, of course, the sensitive point, because until the DGOJ doesn't, first of all, until we do not have the final resolutions against Kalshi and Polymarket, and until we do not have further guidance from our regulator, we would not say that this is 100% definitive assessment. Still, I have in front of me the Spanish order that regulates cross-betting, so apuestas cruzadas, which is the one that the market and the proper DGOJ seem to be indicating into that direction. And I think the best thing here that we could do is have a look at the definition of cross-betting that this order that comes from 2014 is giving us. So I'm just going to read it right away, and you will see how it very quickly could fit into that definition. So an exchange bet, so una apuesta cruzada, it's the bet resulting from the matching of a back bet and of a lay bet offer, both issued by participants on a specific betting event in which the gaming operator acts only as an intermediary and a guarantor of the amounts risked between the participants in said bets. So indeed, we have here the possibility of having players playing against themselves, not against the operator. The operator, such as the active prediction markets are doing, is just keeping a commission of each bet that is being placed. And the proper regulation already also defines what would be back bet offers, so una oferta de apuesta a favor or a lay bet, no, en contra, which are the two possibilities that prediction markets give. We said there are two things, whether something is possible or something is not possible, yes or no. So we do have that. Also, this regulation is interesting and again puts Spain in a really interesting position. Besides the scarcity of licenses that it has, the fact that potentially there is a way on fitting prediction markets into that regulation, because it offers the possibility of sports betting, exchange sports betting, exchange horse racing, and also the type of otras apuestas cruzadas que se le conoce en español. This is the interesting part, because the betting, we all knew that it was possible in Spain, and so far prediction markets would just have had to adapt their platforms to the technology that is allowed by the Spanish regulations to do betting. But we had the problem of the other topics that were not betting. This is defined, other cross bet, type of bet in which the event in question consists on the outcome of one or more bettable events which are not sporting, not horse racing nature, and are included in the programs of the operators. Even more possibilities are available. Of course, users could do single cross betting, multiple cross betting, combined betting, live betting offer, which is also something that would allow users to place bets during the course of an event. And those events, which we talked about before, that may not only be sports or horse racing, are also defined in the regulation as including society, media, economy, entertainment, culture, or other similar matters that will previously have to be determined by the operator in its program. So one of the conditions is that the operator previously in its program gives the type of topics on which users should be able to offer bets. It is the users who are expected to propose a certain bet that they want to place, and it's not until another user will accept the bet or will bet against that it will be active. In between that, there will be more things, such as the fact that the operator will probably have to accept those bets in order to make sure that they respect fundamental rights, moral, ethics, etc. We will, of course, not be able to bet on anything that can go against public order, and that is why operators are expected to have a short list on their sites of the type of topics on which players can bet. The operator commission is also defined, given that the players do not bet against the operator must have this commission, and the specificity of this singular license, the apuestas cruzadas, cross-betting, is that it lasts for 5 years. In case potential players would be interested to explore this regulation, some other things that are to be taken into consideration are the obligation that this specific singular license regulation imposes, such as the fact that you must place tutorials for the players on how to use prediction markets or exchange betting before they place their first bet. Operators also have to keep for a period of 6 months the programs and the event activities which have been bet on. And I had another thing. Okay, we talked about before the fact that prediction markets may bring focus areas for the regulators, which are that how to know if the outcome of the result is correct. So that gives issues with mechanisms to verify outcomes. The regulation already gives a bit of instructions on how this has to be decided by the operator, if it has to be by a public fund or other possibilities that the operator has. It has to be based on written, graphic, testimonial, or other evidence gathered on the fact that a certain outcome of an event is correct, because otherwise it might bring a lot of problems and reclamations from users. So those are just a few things that I wanted to share with you. Mostly I wanted to read the definition so everyone here in the call could hear how it does resemble to prediction markets, even though that was drafted in 2014, and that without a doubt Spain is an interested market to explore for prediction markets.
Well, thank you, Camille. Let's follow this topic in the next weeks and months, and communicate with everybody if there's any movement on that. So before we go to the audience Q&A, again, if you want to go to slido.com or to the app, use the event code #GIS26, can ask or upvote questions. I appreciate it was a high information density in this webinar, and we are only 40 minutes into the webinar. So I think there's quite a few interesting questions. I appreciate your questions. We will not be able to answer them all. Some of them we can probably review and see if we can include them in the post-webinar mailer. We will also show you the email addresses of the speakers, and you can contact them directly. But let's have a look at the first question from the audience here. I guess that's one for you, Xabi. So is it possible to collateralize the operator guarantee with the new framework? You mentioned the increase, and when it gets into force, is it the collateralization mechanism that you mentioned? Is there anything known about that?
Yeah. I mean, there's no problem to collateralize. I mean, the still guarantees can be made in cash or with a bank bond or with an insurance. And also the bank or the insurance company may ask you for some collaterals to provide you with that guarantee. The only thing that it's not possible now is to do like a mortgage on a real estate property that it was possible before. That's the only thing that is not possible. But still a bank guarantee or an insurance, it's possible, or cash, which is not very common, but still possible.
Great. That's quite clear, and that's a change there. So next question we had here: has the DJJ established a maximum or standard deposit limit, or are the limits solely defined by the player? That refers to the cross-operator deposit limits here. So I'm looking at both as you, Xabi, and of course Camille.
Camille, do you want to take this one, or I take it as you wish?
Xabi, by memory, I think it was 700 per day, 1,000. No, you go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's some limits. It's 700 per day, 1,750 per week, or 3,300 per every 4 weeks. And the royal decree defines exactly when the day starts. It's at 6 in the morning until 6 in the morning the next day. The weeks go from Tuesday to Tuesday. So it's all very well defined in the royal decree. And then the player can suppress those limits. I mean, it can increase, it can decrease, and can also suppress the limits and not play with limits.
Okay, that's very helpful, because we also see other regulated markets dealing with this in slightly different ways. Third question from the audience here, and thank you, Xabi, and of course Camille. Josh, I think that's directed to you. It says your name. So besides crypto, any idea why offshore offerings are becoming more popular in Spain?
I'm not sure if it's necessarily just a Spanish problem. It's something we're seeing across Europe. So if we take a sample of, so we looked at 5 markets, primarily Nordic markets, but we looked at just the web traffic to 5 crypto casinos. This was between 2021 and 2024, I believe. So if we look at just the number of visits in millions, in 2021, we saw crypto casinos get around 10 million visits. And then across just the sort of 3 years up to 2024, that increased to 128 million. So again, it's a 12-fold increase. And that's something that we have seen, quite consistently across all markets in Europe. So Spain, actually, I don't think has been hit quite as badly as some markets with higher restrictions, already high tax rates on onshore operators. So it is something that is happening across all of Europe rather than just necessarily to Spain. Of course, prediction markets are contributing to lots of web traffic and things. We don't think they're a massive part of the revenue picture for the offshore market at the minute, but they obviously could become that. And then going forward, the introduction of the mandatory deposit limits could definitely be a factor in what would drive some people to exit the market, especially higher spend players who will be sort of disproportionately affected by those changes.
Well, let's see it all develop. So these numbers are very, very useful, Josh. So let's go to the last question. We have almost 50 minutes into the webinar. Last question to wrap it up here. Do you think that the DJJ, and I guess this is for you, Camille, or if necessary, the courts will accept your legal reasoning regarding the admissibility of prediction markets? Anything you can say about that, Camille?
So from my perspective, besides the fact that we would need to have the final resolution of the situation that's going on with Kalshi and Polymarket, I think the last doubts that we will have will be whether it's indeed the one of apuestas cruzadas instead of mutuas, even though our preliminary assessment is that's rather a cross betting. We think that if we find that a certain business model of a prediction market is hard to fit into this regulation, they will basically have to adapt it. But seeing the definitions that we have in here and the regulatory framework that is already in place and this singular license, we do think that there are a lot of ways of fitting a specific product into this regulation, and that it doesn't. There's no big differentiation from the business models that Kalshi and Polymarkets are having right now. And I am saying that without knowing exactly how the platforms work, without having played on those platforms. But still, I think there will be ways. More guidance will be much appreciated, but I do think that there will be ways on carrying that on.
And especially for international attendees here, just checking, Camille, that's local liquidity, right? Yeah. Okay. I think that's an important aspect of the prediction markets because it's a global phenomenon, and even if something would happen in Spain.
Claro, now
that requirement.
That's interesting that you say that, sorry, because the global liquidity now is possible for poker and not for betting. So that is very interesting what you said, yes, that it's international phenomenon, and no, it will be a pool of bets between Spanish resident participants.
Yeah, okay, well, that's another dynamic to take into consideration. I think we're 51 minutes now. I think it was super interesting, high density of information. Thanks, Camille, Xabi, and Josh for speaking here today and answering the questions, taking the time, sharing your expertise. Hope to see you in Madrid. But for today, thank you for joining us here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Willem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So having come to the end of this webinar, I would like to thank again Xabi, Josh, and Camille. There will be a post-webinar mailer with a link to this video where you can view everything again. I would like to thank our sponsor again for supporting us. Before I let you go, I'd like to remind everyone who joins us today that our Gaming in Spain conference will take place on the 15th of October in Madrid. If you also want to meet key decision makers and other stakeholders, please join us there. The event takes place every year, and this year in October. A lot to talk about, as we saw in this webinar today, so let's continue that conversation in Madrid. For now, thank you for joining us, and see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.